Welcome to Only the Truth. That's all you're gonna get. Let's get into it. Hello, friends. Welcome back. I'm glad you tuned back in to catch up and get the number 2 volume in the series that I'm talking about, Ancient Paganism equals Modern Religion. So we'll go ahead and get right into it, and thanks for tuning in. So in the previous volume in this series, we left off with the ancient pagan system of government migrating from the Tigris-Euphrates region throughout the surrounding world. It's important to make note here that Yahweh told his prophets that the same government which gripped the world in those ancient times would come to power again at the end of the age. So understanding that the end of the age, by proper definition, literally means the end of human existence on earth. And that's what the prophecies we're talking about. The ancient prophecies describe what can be referred to as the Great Reset, or the cleansing, if you will. Many theologies refer to this as the second coming, or the rapture, the apocalypse, so on, etc. All man-made fables aside, Yahweh only makes mention of collecting his harvest at that time, of those who have not been defiled or defiled themselves by worshiping their gods. And sadly, pretty much the entire world has been worshiping their gods for many thousands of years. So you see, Lucifer set that all up beginning, well, actually, when he was first put here, but using primarily Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz as the foundation building blocks for the ancient pagan system, which is now our religious system. So that's been going on for thousands of years, literally. So moving right along. According to the modern and very compromised scripture, there were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward. That's according to the modern scripture, but that's not what the original ancient writings say. The ancient writings include those of Enoch, refer to the existence of Nephilim after the flood. Nimrod was the greatest of those Nephilim. That's Enoch's notes. So, although his influence spread worldwide, not everybody migrated from the Tigris-Euphrates region. Some of the people remained behind in Babylon, where they became the Babylonian nation. In later times, the Chaldeans dominated them. Babylon was the name of their capital city, and Hammurabi was their early king, but Nebuchadnezzar became Babylon's greatest king. Yahweh gave him the dream of the great statue portraying what would come to pass at that time and in the future. Daniel informed him, Daniel the prophet, informed him that he, Nebuchadnezzar, represented the head of gold. So all these things would follow his reign as king. Each of the other portions of that image represented other kings that would follow Babylon in dominating the Western world over the centuries to come. So Medo, Persia, Greece, and Rome, even though they didn't dominate the world, they did dominate the part of the world that the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob dwelled in. That's very important to note. So because the head represented Babylon and the head directs the entire body, the image also shows the continuation of the same general Babylonian system right to its end, represented by the feet and the toes, which were made of iron and baked clay, which no more mixes together than the mixture of the people that form that nation in that end day. Iron and clay don't mix. They can't stand together. So, in other words, that image shows that the pattern established under Nimrod continues even till right now. The people were uniting themselves in disagreement against Yahweh, led by the arch criminal and mastermind of this project, none other than Nimrod. This time Yahweh chose, instead of wiping them out in death, and utter destruction like he had done in the past, especially through the flood. He permitted them to live, but he segregated them extensively by confusing their means of communication, by basically turning off 90% of their brains, which of course made them pretty inferior, according to their original source. And in the end, they were separated from one another. All their glorious plans of building the great city and Nimrod's monument, or more commonly referred to as the tower, it had to be abandoned because they couldn't communicate with each other. They couldn't form plans. They couldn't orchestrate their engineering and bring it together in a way that they could all do their part, because they're like, hey, we're lost without our means of communicating with each other. And as it is right now, all of a sudden we're working with a 10% brain. Now we're just a bunch of bozos. So that kind of screwed things up for them, but it made Yahweh's plan to build a new world have a new beginning. So the tragedy is that because of what Yahweh did at that point, all of these people were scattered all over the face of the earth, and they were also separated from the holy line that came from their original lineage, a family through which Yahweh almost exclusively worked. That began with Shem. Actually, the line began after the death of Abel and Seth, the son of Adam, however you want to pronounce it, and came down through Enoch and to Noah, from Noah to Shem. From Shem, the descendants finally produced Abraham, or Avraham. After Babel, the scattered people were in fact not only separated from that holy line, but also from Yahweh's word, which this family line preserved and passed down. This was another tragic result of their sin. Also in the writings is a very colorful, almost overpowering vision showing the overview of the political system that Lucifer works through. See, that was his thing in the background, behind the scenes, behind the curtains, if you will, the whole time. These people were just his subjects. It actually has its beginnings long before Yeshua the Messiah, all the way back to Nimrod, showing a definite time progression. This is the system that rears its head at the end time. But the vision is given so that we will understand that this is the system that Lucifer has always worked through. And until Yahweh puts a final end to his treachery, the evil and ancient system will continue as described. At this very moment, it's clear that the same satanic strategy enslaves our world today. I mean, seriously, over the years that I spent researching and studying ancient resources, as well as not so ancient resources, my goal was to compile concrete proof that my religion was in fact the correct one, and that all other religious systems were wrong. But the more I dug into it, into the origins of the world's religious systems, the more I discovered about the ancient agenda of Lucifer, and that's what this is all about, which, for the record, has not changed in the slightest over the thousands of years that we have on record. By the way, put a pin in that. That's another one of those put a pin in it things, so keep that one in your notes. Every religious system claims to be the only correct religion and states that the others are wrong. So let me be clear about this one thing right here. It's not possible for all of them to be the correct religion, especially considering that they all differ so much from each other many ways, except for one, and that they all have a replacement for Yahweh. Put a pin in that as well. So we need to get this thing into our vocabulary also. More than anything, all religious systems in the world, especially the modern world, they do one thing, the same. One thing. They all replace Yahweh with the God that they're promoting, the God that they're worshiping, the God that they have defined for the people to call their God and to worship. They've all replaced Yahweh. Or in the ancient tongue, he referred to himself to Abraham as Echa, Asher, Echa, which means his existence is the substance of all other existence. It's been translated as I am that I am, or I am the one that is. It literally means that because of him and through him, everything exists. Without him, nothing exists. We exist because of him. That makes him the one that gets our worship. Not these other fake, made-up, man-made gods. These are idols, and Yahweh hates all of them, like I've said before. And there's a lot of evidence in the ancient writings that describe exactly that. Yahweh told his people, you don't worship anything. I am your creator. I get all of your attention, period. So by that realization alone, it should be easy, even for the simple man, to understand that it is possible and absolutely definite that all of the religious systems are wrong. The ancient resources have already determined this fact many times over. All religious systems are, in fact, man-made. All of them having the agenda of one thing: replacing Yahweh. From the second that Yahweh slapped Lucifer and his rebellious followers out of their dwelling place in the heavens and exiled them to this world that we now call home, Lucifer has been hell-bent on turning everyone and everything against Yahweh. Every single ancient writing from Yahweh's anointed scholars has been rewritten. It has its own rewritten version of itself as a replacement. This is the work of Lucifer's inspired writers, by the way. Over the millennia, Yahweh's writings have been given to his people, and then the twisting and rewriting and replacing and etc. It's called deception, misinformation, disinformation, propaganda. Literally the world's very first account of fake news. That sounds familiar, I know it does. The truth is that absolutely every religious system in the world today are all formed from one version or another of Lucifer's calculated obsession with deception. He has one goal: turn everything and everyone against Yahweh so that together he can overthrow them. Lucifer hates Yahweh. That's been his thing right from the beginning. He wants to defeat Yahweh and dethrone him and take his place in heaven as the one true God. That's his number one goal, and everything he's doing is determined to accomplish that goal. Yahweh never commanded us to form religious systems. He commanded us to flourish and prosper in his sight and give him the glory for our existence. But the entire world has been worshiping their pagan gods for centuries and beyond, doing everything except what Yahweh desires of us, which is to flourish and prosper in his sight and give him the glory for our existence. Yahweh has his own system of how to please him as well as how to not displease him. And it is not governed by man's opinions or by the religious systems. He has commanded that we may not worship any gods in his sight at any time. He also gave us criteria by which to identify anything that he calls a god, which is literally anything that is worshipped instead of him. Every religious system in the modern world has its own definition of what their God is, and that is what they worship, instead of Yahweh. Now, I've been an ordained minister in the past, and a pastor, and I know how these systems work. I've been there, I've done it. The leadership defines what the people are to worship, the God that has been outlined for them. They are also brainwashed to be sure to pay their tithes, or their finances will be cursed. But Yahweh commanded his people to not worship any gods in his sight at any time. They are all pagan idolatry. He also commanded them to pay the government fees for the convenience of using the government's money. And that's legitimate. And Yahweh even told them, you have the convenience of using the government's money and you need to pay their fees. It's fair. The money isn't Yahweh's economic system anyway, and he never promised to bless anyone for giving their money to a church or any other organization, religious or other, for that matter. Yahweh did, however, command them to give him what does belong to him, which is our loyalty, our unwavering devotion, and our exclusive worship. None of these religious systems do that. They all want your money. So at this point, it's clear that the entire world is under the deception of Lucifer's seduction. So much so that we're willing to fight with anybody that challenges our faith. We get in their face. They're like, oh, no, you're wrong. My religion's right and yours is wrong. Everybody does it. This is largely and perhaps entirely based on the culture of extreme interest grouping. Motivational and inspirational speeches and persuasive campaigning establishes and maintains the mindset of the collective. This is the accurate and very true description of the religious system, the architecture of the ancient religious system rears its head in the modern world today. Challenge or disagree or question any of their theology, and you'll quickly be brought into subjection. If you refuse to comply, you will be removed from the collective and very likely lose your friends, maybe even some, if not all, of your family. This is the power that Lucifer's directive has over the world today, just as it has been for centuries. Don't think for a minute that no one understands the complexities of being caught in Lucifer's multi-layered trap. Everybody's in it. It's not something new, and it's not something that you're not going to find someone that doesn't know anything about it or has experienced this. So literally, that is the majority of Yahweh's reason for coming to earth. It was to educate us about that very trap and how to escape it, more importantly. The accounts of these events were documented by those Yahweh selected to be his students, one each to represent each of the 12 tribes of Yaakov, or Jacob. You've heard it referred to as the 12 tribes of Judah. It was literally the descendants of Yaakov. At this time, those documents have been made into a jackwagon storybook for the gullible. That's something you need to understand. In our English theology, it's referred to as the New Testament. In other writings and theologies around the world, it has different names, but primarily the writings of Yahweh Shua HaMashiach's students, that's the Messiah. The writings were taken, altered, things removed, things added, twisted, and changed what they say. Changed the information, but thereby changing the instructions and the ultimate learning process that's involved in the teachings that Yahweh intended to give to the world in order to be able to find him and please him. It comes down to this. There's only one way to escape Lucifer's trap. It consists of several steps, all of which are quite challenging, actually. It's not easy. The first one is realizing and accepting the fact that you are actually in a trap. Let's just call it a prison for all intents and purposes. So having this perception of reality is critical for developing an overall dislike for the trap. The second step is recognizing that everyone else who are in this trap can be perceived as the clergy in the churches, perhaps, as the prison guards, and all of its members, as well as the congregation, consider them your inmates, if you will. So if you've made it this far, the next step is honestly to answer Yahweh's question. Do you want to be free from this trap? Keep in mind, this isn't about your family. It's not about your friends or your neighbors, and especially not about the church. This is about what Yahweh will accept as his when he purges the earth. The only way to become Yahweh's is to completely denounce everything else that owns you, which is pretty much everything in this world. Because if we belong to Lucifer's trap, when Yahweh gets here, he will leave us here when he purges the earth. That's not good. And according to the prophecies, that time is much, much closer than the world even realizes. And for the record, absolutely everyone in the ancient prophecies, they all indicate what will happen in the end days. And honestly, those prophecies have been occurring like clockwork right under our noses. And the fake news media has been diverting our attention towards other mentally taxing concepts as to keep us blinded from the truth. Lucifer hates the truth almost as much as he hates Yahweh. He hates us. He hates the truth. He hates Yahweh. So like I always say, put a pin in it. And we'll pick up where we left off in the upcoming video. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail as to where we are today, according to the ancient prophecies leading up into the end days, and what it means for us going forward, and how we should be interacting with Yahweh to get his approval, so that when his prophecies play out, as they absolutely will, make no mistake, Yahweh's prophecies are going to be fulfilled in a very short order, and he will only accept one thing, and that's compliance. We need to find out what that is, and we need to do it. So I'm going to be presenting some of what that criteria is, so that by the time Yahweh does what he's going to do, we can be found acceptable, so that we're amongst those that he finds acceptable instead of those that he finds destroyable. This is not a joke. This isn't something that's easy to say, and I know it's not something that's easy to take. But what it comes down to is this is Yahweh's world. It's not ours. These are Yahweh's rules, not ours. Yahweh doesn't want to destroy us, but we've chosen something instead of him, and he won't accept anything that's impure. It's that simple. So we need to discover what it is to be undefiled and acceptable in his sight. That's literally the only way. So be sure to subscribe so that you'll be sure to see the next video in this series. I'll try and get it out as quick as I can so that you're not left wondering, where's he going? I need the rest of this so that I can make a decision about what I think about it. So as always, I really want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.